Welcome to the Feel Better, Be Better show. Today, Kate and Nevada will answer your questions and introduce new topics designed to help feel better and be better. These are raw conversations, but they will make a difference.
And welcome to the Kinetics Feel Better, Be Better show!
You're so extra.
Well, the sad part is I can go mumble through everything else and then I can do that crap. Yeah, you probably should leave that in. Anyway, hey, hitting back, perspectives and coaching and parents and players and tournaments and just general grumblings.
Yeah.
Is that about it?
Yeah.
Did I cover everything?
Yeah.
Sweet. All right. Do we need anything else on that one?
No.
Nope. And enjoy the show! All right, so let's see here. What were we coming off of last time? What was our last show?
I mean, I don't know how to explain it in words, but
In words? Yeah, okay. All right, fine. Well, then what the heck with it. We'll just go right into it because we were talking about it before. We were driving back from a tournament.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So, and it was more of like, that's what it was. It was the expectations that we're looking for out of, from a player perspective, from a coaching perspective, or from a parent perspective. So I think the ones we were about on, we kind of covered coaching.
Mm-hmm.
I think we kind of covered player a little bit. I think now we're hitting the parent one, which I think is going to be a lot of interesting type stuff. Am I off?
I don't know that I would call the direction we talked about in the car parent, but sure, go ahead.
I know we were talking more of the coaching.
I was going to say.
I think we're going to pull the coaching back in because we had really good examples this weekend.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I think it can I think we're going to pull it back in because I think you're going to see some of the parent perspective coming out from that. So I think I'll just go ahead and set the stage real quick. So we took our newly formed team, girls coming off of rec ball. We don't hit it too intensely. There's a lot of other teams that hit it pretty intense. I mean, we're 1-2 practices a week. During the wintertime, it's pretty optional.
Yeah. Like I told them, most of those players had been playing for a couple months, multiple practices indoors, and we have been team mandatory practices for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So
And,
a little different.
The teams, and we keep our fees pretty low on that one. That's our whole goal, is to give people an avenue to get good coaching, to go see if they want to do that next level.
Mm-hmm. And not take all the time, because some people like to play other sports, some people have other family stuff and other commitments going on, and they don't want to invest all their time into one thing all year long.
Well, not only time, but a lot of money too.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of that thing where it's like, if you are that level and you want to go to that next level and pay that kind of stuff and put that kind of time commitment, there are teams that are for you, and that's not us.
Yeah. I think that's part of parent perspective when you're looking for something is, how much time and money and resources do you want to put into it? Because I know growing up, I played every weekend, and when my team wasn't playing, I subbed on other teams, and
Mm-hmm.
we played, 1.5, 2 hours away most of the time, and it takes up every weekend of your time, all your free time, all your summer time, all your spring break time. We didn't get to go do vacations. You kind of had to do a few fun things when you went to these tournaments, and that was play it by ear because you didn't know when your games were.
No, you got to work in your family time into the athletic time.
Yes, and then on top of it, you do go do team dinners, and so you couldn't just go as a family wherever you wanted to necessarily. You kind of wanted to do the team stuff because that's important too, and so you really sacrifice doing the family thing. Even though you're getting family time in, you kind of sacrifice that, especially if you have multiple kids doing it and you're splitting directions and splitting family time. That's a lot of money, so then you don't have time to maybe do some other stuff. And so if that's the rate you really want to go to, really play a lot of games, get a lot of repetition, see a lot of competition, improve and put yourself in the best position to keep progressing, great. But a lot of people, they just want to get better to be able to keep playing at the next level, which it might be high school, might be going to a junior college or whatever, which is no small feat in and of itself, even though some people act like it. And some people are like, no, I'm fine playing 1 or 2 weekends a month for 4 months and practicing just a couple nights a week.
Well, and we've talked about a lot. I mean, how much kids change.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, kids that look amazing when they're 8 under, 10 under, 12 under, may not even play when they're in high school. I mean, kids change so much.
Yeah. Well, and if you have a kid on the opposite end of that
Yep.
just wants to play for fun, is out there doing it, wants to get better, but they're just not fully invested in that, do you really want to pay all that money when you can wait and see if they peak and really enjoy it later on and then move into something that's maybe more competitive like that? I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I've seen a lot of girls that have taken that route and been just as fine successful-wise down the road.
Well, you also get in a situation too where it could be detrimental to that kid. Because it's one thing when you're with some peers, you're feeling kind of like you're not really out of the realm, but you go take a kid that maybe is not quite developmentally ready to go on a really good team, and they're surrounded by really good players, and they are the worst player, and it's very clear. You can really discourage that kid into wanting to do much better. So, I mean, you could end up hurting that scenario.
Yeah, especially if they're the kid who, there's some kids that rise up to the challenge and want to push themselves to get better because they're not the best on their team, and there's some that just fold and it's not fun anymore. And if it's not fun, what's the point?
Well, the interesting thing about that whole striving to get that carrot type scenario and that carrot stick argument on that one is you also have to have a taste for the carrot. So if you never get a chance to taste the carrot, is it ever even a true reward?
No.
So, I mean, occasionally you have to be successful at whatever level you're on, or it's not really a real carrot. So I think you kind of watch out for that a little bit. It's one thing to make sure, I'm going to make sure my kid has against the best competition. We're going to challenge them to be setting up and all that stuff and everything. Great, unless it doesn't work for the kid.
Yeah. And I think that's something you have to assess, because I know as coaches we assess that a lot in the fact, like, no, we're taking girls who need to work on certain fundamental skills and helping them develop those so that they become more of a solid player to be able to teach higher stuff to. With that, though, I mean, we've already talked about, you know, if we're at C-ball and we're winning a lot of tournaments, there's no point in staying in C-ball anymore. I mean, you've got to move up to the next one, because if you're just winning all the time, you're really not learning anymore. It's not pushing you to learn anymore. So it's the same with a player on a team. You might have a girl who fits in great with her team that maybe is in rec or moved from rec, but she's ready to move to that next level and needs to move to, and we've talked about that too with players. Like, there's some that eventually will probably need to move on to a different type of team and situation that can challenge them and push them, because if they are in a place that's a different place than everybody else, it really doesn't do any good to stay there.
Yep.
And so it's a constant like tug of war between not doing too much to where you discourage the kid, but not doing so little that they just stay stagnant where they're at because there's nothing to push them anymore.
Yep. But again, I mean, when I said that whole thing about the carrot and the egg, I mean, you kind of hit it. If we're there winning, so they're getting a taste of that carrot. So, I mean, that is key.
Yeah.
I mean, you got to at least have that thing. Right now, our carrots are very low. You know, it's good hit, you know, great play, you know. So
not the wins yet, but man, look at you backing up and doing
yeah.
stuff.
Yeah, that's funny when your compliment for the person is, hey, good backup. You know, I mean, that carrot is really low. So, but no, I think I wanted to definitely get into what we talked about on the car ride home from the tournament. And I think I really brought it up pretty hard, but it was very interesting to watch the differences in the coaching styles.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is we have a very young group, a group that's very much, we're still working fundamentals. We're working on throwing. We're working on fielding. We're working on batting setup.
Where
stance,
to move when the ball gets hit.
Where to move when the ball gets hit. All that good stuff. How to lead off. I mean, how much did you see me doing leadoffs this weekend? I mean, it is insane. It was like every girl, I'm like, all right, let's go do your leadoff. You know, which, I mean, let's face it, is pretty low level.
Yeah.
Me and you both know a lot of the tricks and trades. We know a lot of the fun stuff you can do. We know ways to be able to steal runs, steal hits, steal, you know, all kinds of different bases and all that kind of stuff and everything. We know those things. We're not there yet. So, but it was interesting because what I saw more of is I saw more of girls that we were playing against that were kind of closer to that level, our level, but the coaches were doing those other things. And I'm just sitting there the entire time. I'm like, wow, how much of their practice was dedicated to like the trick play setup or
delayed steals,
delayed steals, you know, the fake bunts and swings and that kind of stuff with a kid that maybe not has the best fundamentals at the plate, may not have the best fundamentals of doing defense and throwing and everything like that. And I'm just looking at it going like, oh no, they're a really good team. I mean, they got talent, they're doing well, but what about when that girl gets and all the people have caught up The players can now throw the ball around. The steals are a lot harder to come by. You're not just be able to just get somebody off and have a bad throw. You know, the pitchers are going to be bringing it in different spots and different speeds in areas that you don't want it at.
Well, and you even mentioned too, like that stuff is all great. Knowing that stuff is great.
Yeah.
But if you can't hit the ball to get on base, nobody gives a crap if you can delay steal.
Yeah.
Because you have to first and foremost get on base. So can you be disciplined at the plate to swing at good pitches, especially early in the count? And is your swing fundamental enough that you can get on base?
Yes.
Because if you can't do that, then it doesn't matter. Like, it looks great when you play a team where their pitching is a little spotty to where, you know, like us, we were walking some people because we're still working on consistency.
We had like 2 brand new pitchers that hadn't even pitched for like more than 3 months.
Exactly. So, you know, we're still working on our consistency and throwing strikes most of the time and getting them to put the ball in play. So when you walk and you're doing that stuff, you look awesome. Because everybody's like, oh my God, they're getting on base, they're delaying steals, they're running all over the place, making the girls throw the ball around. But you get a good pitcher that nobody can hit, I mean, that shuts that down immediately, and they don't look so good anymore.
No.
It takes all that away.
It may not even be a really great pitcher.
Yeah.
Maybe you just have a pretty good pitcher that can throw strikes in a defense.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, if you have your defense and they're coached that well, you can't do those delayed steal type things. They'll get you out.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, anyway, the whole point I was, when we were talking about this, is like, I could easily see as a parent that doesn't necessarily see that perspective and then looking at total fundamentals is just looking and like, man, look at all the people that are getting on base and they're running around. They're making our team look completely dumb all over the place because we're throwing the ball like a snowball fight.
Mm-hmm.
And somebody can say, well, we're not coaching them up on that one. And I think we would sit back and be like, oh no, we haven't even gotten there yet.
Yep.
We're still here. That's like next level. And then maybe some other ones after that. But I worry because you look at that and you're like, wow, look at how good of a coaching job you're doing. I'm sitting there like going like, oh man, I don't know how good those players are going to do on the next level. I hope they're able to develop. I hope there's some development going on in the backs and behind the scenes. But what I'm seeing as a coach is I'm going like, oh, you did all these things to be able to steal games on a 12-year-old tournament. And it's just like, I don't think that's going to translate well to a high school team. I don't think it's going to translate well to a U14B team or something like that. You're going to be stuck at that level.
Yeah. I think another important point that you brought up in the car too, and what we talked about is, you know, as a parent, as a player, as a coach, there's a difference in coaches that just tell the players what they need to do all the time and teaching kids how to read situations. And there's a difference between when to do that and when not to do that. Like we talked about, you know, having to be some give and take on that, like if you're calling pitches and stuff like that. But you see that all the way up the collegiate level, that there's some coaches that, like you said, call every throwdown. They call every pitch. They call every type of steal. As a player, you have to be able to read certain situations and react in the moment and know what you can and can't get away with, because you can't wait for a coach to tell you. You have to develop those instincts. So if you have a coach who's just always telling you, this is when we're doing a delayed steal, but not why we're doing it, because, you know, the pitcher's not paying attention, or, you know, when she turns this way, you're guaranteed to get over here. Like, you need to be looking at it ahead of time.
No, it's usually listen to me, I'll tell you.
Yeah, so then you're not teaching them how to read a situation to where if they're with a different coach or they move on to the next level or whatever, they're not able to ever read that on their own. They're just used to you hand feeding them when they're supposed to do something, not why they're supposed to do something and what to look for.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, and we were talking about this. I mean, we're seeing it in, you know, defense, how they're supposed to, you know, who's supposed to cover whatever, who's backing up this, what we're doing here. I remember last year quite a few times. I mean, the catchers wanted to show that they were going to throw, but they never threw it unless the play was called.
Yep.
I mean, they weren't able to make a decision. The player wasn't old enough to make a decision.
Yeah.
And I was just like, I kind of sat back. I'm like, no, I want the player to make the decision. Why? Because when they make it, it's this. It's not like, oh, is it okay? You know, did they say I could throw it? You know, it's like, no, you've got to recognize you're helping your team. They're not going to always be around to do that. And by the time you get up to certain levels, you don't have time to do that.
No, or you have coaches that pick off, like, if you call a certain number or a color or whatever, as a good coach, if I'm paying attention, I'm going to know what it is, and I'm going to be able to relay that to my players. Like, you're not sneaky with it. You take away the element of surprise. But even with that, like, we had one of our 12Us today. She asked me on third, she's like, if I lead off, when the catcher throws it to the pitcher, can I go because she's not paying attention? I'm like, sure, we can try it. It was great of her to ask. Now, did she do it correctly? No, she got pushed back and then went, and she almost got out. She was lucky and got safe, but I love the effort. But if she would have got out, it's a perfect teaching opportunity to be like, okay, what did we do wrong in this situation? How can we be more successful the next time? What do we need to look at? Where's your range and speed? If you don't let anybody mess up, same with throws from home. If I come up and I fire straight to third and she takes off back at me and scores, I'm like, oh crap, maybe I shouldn't just do that. You know, I mean, I'm going to have to think of why did that go wrong? How can I make her commit and throw her out?
Mm-hmm.
So without having that, I mean, messing up and looking dumb is one of the best teachers to help you realize maybe I shouldn't do that.
Yeah, no kidding. No, that one's definitely a big one on that one. But and we did kind of have a moderate disagreement. You were kind of more on the catchers being able to call the game, but I think I actually brought up a point that you kind of probably kind of agreed on that one. I mean, I still a pretty firm believer of you have somebody that's basically kind of telling you where it should be, because the coaches are kind of there. We're evaluating the hitters, the situation, you know, everything that's going on in that game. The catcher is sitting back trying to run the field. You got, you know, runners on base, you got the game situation, you got the batter, you got the pitcher. They're trying to cover enough. So I'm like, I kind of still agree that you have somebody else saying like, no, let's do this and let's do this, because it's really hard as a catcher to take on the information of, well, what did we pitch them last time? What does it look like they're expecting? That's a lot of things to do while you're just trying to catch the ball and keep an eye on the runners. So I mean, there's some give and take. You just kind of said it like nobody lets anybody call the game anymore. I'm like, well, I kind of agree with that one.
Well, and the difference is what I see now is coaches just call it and catchers don't ever communicate what they're seeing behind the plate.
Yep.
And so it's very much as a coach, I tell you, you just do. Mm-hmm. As a catcher, I need to be able to learn the situation of, okay, my coach called this, but same as a pitcher, I might see something different that I want to shake off. You know, it might not be all the time, but I need to recognize, like, yeah, they might be calling it from their side, but I see that she's here in the box, or I see that this is going on, or I see whatever. You need to be able to have that conversation with your coach and work together to develop that game plan for, you know, I don't like that pitch. What can we do?
Yep. Because
you have to feel good about it on your end too. But I see so many catchers, they're just told and they just do.
Yeah. Well,
at whatever level.
I'll break out the broken record here, but I mean, it's kind of an interesting thing on perspective. So if you don't have a working group, you don't have a working communication with your coach between the catcher, between the pitcher, and you're basically as a coach, you're just I don't care, do what I say. Mm-hmm. That pitcher or that catcher may have a different perspective that they can see something that you can't. And I know that's almost blasphemy on those coaches. But I mean, they may see a little hitch. It's really hard when you're off to the side. How close are they to the plate? Mm-hmm. How, you know, what is their setup here? How, you know, what do you see on the backside of what we can't see on the other side? So, I mean, what you're talking about is much rather having a working group to be able to come to the best conclusion.
Yes. And there probably are a lot of them that you just don't see it off to the side that are having those conversations, or they do a million hours of game feed before they go play. Because, I mean, shoot, now with technology, we can watch, and the fact that games are on TV all the time now, if you're at the collegiate level, you can scout your opponents to a T to where you can have all those conversations before you ever see them on the field. So that might be something that's completely developed together beforehand. But I guarantee you there's some coaches that are just like, no, I'm calling it, and you just pitch whatever I tell you to pitch.
Well, yeah, there's companies and groups now and stuff like that, and a lot of college programs in particular, and sports and pro programs. I mean, the coaches are given the feeds of the games, and you're like, man, that's a lot to watch. Well, no, they took out all the extra stuff. Mm-hmm. It is, you know, only the real activity. They're cutting out all the other stuff. So, I mean, they'll watch an entire game in like 30 minutes, which is impossible for us. I mean, we have to go edit it and stuff like that. But there's people that are just getting paid just to edit that down so they can be able to get that information that fast. Turn it over to their players so they can strategize the right thing. So they're probably having good meetings like that, the ones that do that. What we're seeing, though, is you're seeing coaches that are seeing that on the college level and saying, oh, look, they're just totally controlling everything, so I'm just going to control everything. And it's like, I don't think you're seeing the whole thing.
Yeah.
They've probably had 4 hours of talking about how we're going to go about this and the reason why before you ever get in there. You're just doing a game.
Yeah.
We don't have time to scout.
No.
We're not getting game film on the other 12U teams around here. I mean, that's insane.
Well, I mean, there's some good coaches that you see when their pitcher and catcher comes off and they'll explain, okay, I want to throw this pitch here and you missed that spot because of this.
Yep.
And they'll tell their players why they want that. And that's great because that helps them understand why it's important to hit that spot, why he's calling that pitch or she's calling that pitch. Why are we doing this? But then there's some coaches that there's no talk at all.
And
they're just, it's just like, yeah, you hit the spot or you need to hit your spots. And that's all you hear. And there's nothing to build off of that. There's no learning to be a student of the game and how to grow and what to look for. And
I don't think you realize how much you might turn the player off by that. Because, I mean, you're basically, what you're telling them in that case is that they'll never understand.
Mhm.
No, they're too dumb to get it. You're also putting them in a situation where they don't feel like they have any control over it. So what are you teaching them? I mean, it's just, it's like it's not them. It's just like they're just a puppet for you to be able to play. So, I mean, how do they connect? Are they able to find their own way if it's basically controlled the entire time?
Yeah. And I think as a player, that's a very important perspective to go find a coach that you feel comfortable with to be able to have those conversations.
Yep.
Because I love it when my players come up to me and ask, well, why are we doing this? Or what about in this situation? What do I need to do?
I love you say you love it. That's literally when you're like, and now we're here. Thank you.
Yeah. And so like even like our 12Us today, I had like 4 or 5 ask me random questions that weren't even situations we were necessarily in the middle of, especially like when they're sitting on the bench. Like I love it when they're just sitting on the bench and they're standing up there like, well, what if like she caught the ball and she threw it here, but then this person dropped it and something weird happened over here. And you're like, okay, I'm following your process. It's like, okay, let's talk through it. What does that mean?
Yep.
But, you know, them feeling comfortable enough to ask the question,
Mm-hmm.
I love it.
Huge step.
Yeah.
Because on a lot of those teams, they don't feel comfortable asking the question.
No.
Because the answer sometimes is a lot of like, because I said so.
Yeah. Or you won't get it. Like, don't worry about that.
Or I got you'll understand later.
Mhm.
Which no, there's a lot of that happens. But pulling it back around though, I would easily and almost expect as a parent that you're seeing these teams that are doing that. There's a game or two that we had today that I'm sitting there looking at this game going like, yeah, if I had a pitcher that would just throw a little bit better strikes and we were not like jitters for the first game of the season and kind of were able to do a little bit of like, let's make sure we're paying attention to this or that, the game would have been a totally different conversation. It wouldn't have been a beatdown like it was.
No.
But at the same time, I'm looking at that parents probably going like, well, they actually get their players to do stuff. How come our coaches aren't doing that? And it's like,
Yeah.
I mean, I can, but I'm in it for your kid to, 1, love the game, 2, be able to play at the next level, 3, be able to continue to develop, and 4, ask questions and learn how to solve their own problems. So, I mean, we're looking for something different. That coach is looking to beat a team that's not ready.
Yeah.
And we're a team that's not ready.
And those are the type of situations that I love it because it's like, okay, beginning of the season, we're playing this team and it looks like this. I almost wish we could film it. I mean, we're so busy with other things, we need somebody to film it. And then play that team later in the season at some tournament and see how different it is because it usually is so different once they've had a few games under their belt and they feel more comfortable with the basics. I mean, it's night and day. And so just to have those teams, because we've had teams come back and like, oh my God, you've gotten so much better. It's like, yep, we've been working on stuff. We've been working on the basic stuff so we can get to the higher stuff.
Yep. And by the way, thank you very much for that beat down early because you basically allowed me to be able to go, this is why we're doing this.
Mm-hmm.
These are the reasons why. So that doesn't happen. Then they start focusing, paying attention, and we build up from there, and all of a sudden it doesn't work anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, like I said, it's just, you really got to ask yourself from a parent perspective. And I think one of the things that I know I've heard, and I'm sure you've heard plenty too, is, I mean, like, you know, trying to get their confidence up. So we want them to win. You know, it's, everybody has more fun when they're winning. No kidding. You know, and I think it's interesting because I don't think winning a team sport truly increases individual confidence.
I don't think so. I don't think it teaches your team how to like be together and push either, like that team chemistry from there as well. For everything we've seen, the years that we've done like really well and won most of our games, it's kind of been like, yeah, we're a decent team. But the teams where we've like transitioned in here to a harder level and lost every game, even though we've gotten better and been in games, I don't know. It feels different. It feels like the girls you would imagine would get discouraged and not want to be there, but it's almost like they pull in more, and they're like, no, we can be here for each other. We can look how close we're getting. Look how much better we're getting. Kids are way more resilient than we give them credit for. Like, so many people are like, oh, I'm afraid to go take them to that first tournament because we're just going to get beat by so much and run ruled by all these teams. And you will. Like, that's just how it is. Very few teams can transition from rec to competitive as they are and compete. Like, it's a different level. You kind of have to figure it out. And it's just hard. And so, but like with that and having now 30, 40 girls that we've done that with, most of them come back and are like, yeah, it sucks to lose. And yeah, it was really hard and stressful, but like, I want to get better now. I want to be able to be on that field with them. Very few, unless they really just don't really want to be there, come back and be like, no, I'm done. I don't want to do that.
Yeah. Well, I think it was very telling this weekend that the fact that we did win that last game on a team that honestly I don't think really expected to win.
Mm-hmm.
On a team, they were trying plenty though, and I don't think they expected to. I don't even remember them talking about winning.
No, they didn't even know what the score was.
They didn't
know if they were close or losing or winning or what.
No, we knew we were winning,
mm-hmm.
But I mean, they didn't care. They just didn't care.
No, they were out there talking to each other, cheering each other up. You know, we had a new pitcher kind of who's been working on in the off season a little bit here, but hasn't pitched a ton. And she was just super pumped that she was getting strikes across the plate in the god awful win. And you had her team behind her, like ready
cheering
to make some plays,
yep.
cheering her on. And when they made mistakes, nobody got on each other horribly bad. And
yep.
I mean, it was just that type of focus and being positive was really nice to see.
Yeah, and that's when, I mean, it's a nice cliche, you know, that people like to say, like, I don't do it just to win and blah, 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 you know, and stuff like that. But a lot of times you can catch yourself compromising in that regard. Mm-hmm. That, I mean, yeah, I can just do this and we'll get a couple runs across or we'll disrupt them or something like that. But that's a whole different world when you can be like, nope, I want my team to literally play for fun, play for love, and not necessarily care. And we saw some of that today. Mm-hmm. I mean, we literally got to see them. They didn't know what the score was. They did not. They thought, I bet you asked them, I bet they thought they lost that game. And they won it. And it was funny. So, and it was, of course, a scrimmage. It's not like anybody's really keeping stats here, but we know. Mm-hmm. And that's what we're looking for. We're like, once you get to that point that you're comfortable like that, you will go on. Now, I said, you know, winning and being successful doesn't necessarily gain confidence. Somebody will probably argue with that. Well, there is a difference between lowering anxiety and gaining confidence. And so I definitely would say it's way less anxiety to be on a team that you know can pick you up. You're not going up there thinking all the weight's on you.
Yeah.
On our teams, and quite a few times when you're younger teams that are learning and getting going, yeah, it's going to feel like every at bat, every pitch, every play is going to be the weight on you because we just don't have much to give. So I can make it give you a lot more anxiety. But I don't think necessarily being on a team that can lower your anxiety can necessarily totally increase your confidence. Yeah. And I think we saw some of that this weekend as well. Because we've known some of those other girls that were on some of the other teams, and I didn't see an increase in confidence. I saw a decrease in anxiety of the game. I didn't see a decrease in anxiety in their performance.
Yeah, especially if you end up being on a team that's not as good and you're in a pivotal position, so you feel like you have to perform really well. And you go to a better team and you're in a position where the ball probably is not going to get hit very much, or you're sitting on the bench half the time and batting. And then you're like, oh, they're not really counting on me. There's a lot less stress in there regardless of what's going on.
Yep.
I mean, you don't have the same weight on you.
Correct. That doesn't necessarily mean you're more confident in what you're doing.
No.
So, I mean, it's just interesting because we can easily mistake that less anxiety for more confidence because you're not talking about what you're worried about. That doesn't necessarily mean you're more confident.
Yeah.
I think we kind of, as parents, as adults, we kind of don't understand the full distinction between those two.
Yeah. I'm going to kind of shift here because I'm curious.
Not allowed.
Always allowed. You do it all the time.
Never.
But, you know, from a coaching side too, you really have to be aware of those parent perspectives and not take it personal. And it's really hard not to. I mean, we've had girls who parents are looking for the other things that we've been talking about. And some of them, yeah, might need to move and some of them might not. And yes, you want to keep the players that you've worked so hard with and they've gotten so good. And sometimes you have to be okay letting them go. And sometimes you've got a player that's like, oh, they're kind of a pivotal spot. They're not quite ready yet. And they're looking for something different out of a coach than what you can give them.
Yep.
And they want the flashy.
Yep.
And you have to be okay letting that go and not taking it personal. And it is so hard. It is so hard to not be like, well, what I'm doing just must not matter because parents don't seem to care because I've got, a couple girls who bailed ship here and they want to go over to this team that's doing the flashy stuff, which I know compromises what I'm trying to teach. And it gets discouraging. It does. And I would be lying if I said it didn't. But then you really have to look back at your parents that really do appreciate what you are trying to teach and their perspectives do line up with yours and just take that as your win. Now, if all your parents are bailing on you, you're probably doing something wrong.
Sure.
But it's a hard one. It's super hard.
Did you actually have a question in there for me?
Your opinion on it.
Oh, okay. My opinion is actually really simple. I really feel sorry for them. Because as soon as that point comes up, unless it's handled amazingly perfectly, which never does, because feelings get in the way, I feel sorry for them. I mean, it's because they're just never going to be in a situation where they're going to feel comfortable again. I mean, me and you have done that. I mean, I know I played for certain teams where I didn't, but I never burned my bridge.
Yeah.
Usually I went to the coach and told him I was going to play with another team, asked me if it was okay, asked me if they had any problem with it. If you do that, fine.
Well, especially if you have a coach that you can have that conversation with.
Exactly.
They won't hold it against you. And I feel like we are, have had players like that, and we still chat with them when we're out, but you can just see how
they didn't handle it correctly.
They're not comfortable.
They didn't handle it correctly.
Yeah.
It's hard. I'm not saying it's easy. But here's the reason why I really feel sorry for them. They're basically taking a step out of some people that are really looking for them as a long-term development scenario and usually going to somebody that's looking for a short-term solution. And it's usually not necessarily in developing them. And you usually find that out really quickly. As soon as you do that, you may think of all the stuff that's like, oh, yeah, but we're doing this or whatever. But if you're not really seeing the progression, if you're not really seeing the confidence, if you're not really seeing the comfortableness, then is it really working out? I mean, I don't know if it is then. And only the parents can judge that. But ultimately, since it can never be handled right because somebody's going to feel bad in one way or another, you're kind of burning a bridge. And we have talked about that. I mean, unfortunately, on some of the ways that most of the ones that have ever been handled, it wasn't like a decision. It was more of an emotional. And so you kind of they've left us in a little bit of a bad spot. And so unfortunately for us, we kind of have to hold the ground there because we can't, what are you going to do? I mean, you can't, what are you telling the rest of the team if you pull them back in a situation that they want to come back? No, we never had they want to come back. So, I mean, I'm sure it's a little bit of an ego thing on that one, but I'm just trying to say, I'm like, when we've talked about it, you kind of have to hold your ground because otherwise you're setting a precedent that could be very bad for your team. Now, the other one I feel sorry about in that case is that most of the time when it's done, I feel bad about their perspective. And that is, I want to be on this really good team and you guys aren't. And it's like, man, I wonder if that kind of perspective on that would actually have something to do with that. Because if you're willing to sit there and help your teammates get better to where you can be one of those teams, that team's probably going to be pretty good. It's the teams that are going, well, it's their fault. That team doesn't usually do very good, but that's for the players that usually move on. They usually have chemistry problems with players, which in a team sport becomes an issue. And usually when you look back on it with those players, you're like, oh, yeah, there was that. You're just like, oh, I kind of missed that. So there's a different problem that you don't get to solve. Now, if you're just in a bad situation and you don't like the coaching and everything like that, you should do what you need to do. And that's why I've never taken it personally. I'm not the cup of tea for every person. There's plenty of other different kinds of cups of tea. You should find the right one that fits you. And that's why I'm just like, I hope it works out great. I really do. If you need help, I can help you. I'll be more than happy to put in the time and do the effort to be able to help you out. Usually we don't hear back from them.
Mm-hmm.
So my perspective is that it's usually handled pretty poorly. I mean, I think we've talked about if there are some players that might be better with somebody else.
Yeah.
And we talk about that kind of stuff, because if what we're doing isn't working, is that really beneficial to the kid? If the parental perspective on that doesn't line up with what we're doing, how is that helping that kid? You've got parents saying one thing, coach saying another. That's not going to go well. So we talk about those scenarios. Are we really doing the kid long-term good if we're keeping him in that? So that's kind of my opinion on it. Other than that, I mean, me and you talk about it all the time. I mean, I think you should play more, play with different people, see how things go, because that's going to expand your knowledge base, your experience base, and all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
So I think we could probably keep going at this for quite a while, but I think we probably ought to break here.
Yeah.
We can come back
before we
at
go
it
into
later.
another topic.
Well, we still have more on this that I know I want to talk about, but I'm just like, at the same time, I'm also getting hungry. So I think we're gonna call this a night, and we can come back at those other points some other time.
Sound good?
All right. Have a good night.
Thank you for watching Kate and Nevada. Hope you've enjoyed this show and found it useful and empowering. If you have any questions or comments, please contact them at Kinetics.com. That's KNETICX.com. They're on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok as well. And please write a review of the show. Kate and Nevada appreciate hearing the feedback, and they welcome your reviews, and your word of mouth will help others learn how to feel better and be better.